1045 The Team, your home for New York Yankees baseball. Very cool that we are joined by ESPN's Jayson Stark right now. First of all, I just read at ESPN.com about the former PED guys potentially becoming managers. You wrote it. Great article. Should they get that kind of opportunity?
Well, I think baseball has already spoken on this, right? Think how many of these guys have been allowed to work in the game as coaches. Right. Mark McGwire is the bench coach in San Diego. Barry Bonds is the hitting coach in Miami. Roger Clemens is an instructor for the Astros. Manny Ramirez is an instructor for the Cubs. You see where we're going with this, right? So I think baseball is saying, whatever the writers think about the Hall of Fame, we don't see a stigma. I actually talked to a guy who said, we're past that. And so the question now becomes, would that mean it's okay for them to manage?
Right.
And if so, who's most likely to manage and who's least likely to manage? It was kind of fun ranking them.
Well, do you think that there would be a glass ceiling at some point, or from what you're seeing, is it clear like we're going to see either Barry Bonds or Alex Rodriguez or Mark McGwire as the full-blown skipper at some point?
I looked at 6 players for this piece, right? I looked at Mark McGwire, I looked at Barry Bonds, I looked at A-Rod, I looked at Jayson Giambi, and then 2 guys who have zero shot, Roger Clemens and Manny Ramirez. But it was fun to at least contemplate.
Right.
And of those 6, I really think the 2 who could conceivably do this are McGwire, because he's now spent 7 years as a coach and is now a bench coach. He's put in the time more than anybody else on the list. And the other is Jayson Giambi, who interviewed for the Rockies managerial job a few years ago, the job that Walt Weiss got, and they loved it. Terry Francona has described him as a manager in waiting, kept him on the team really when he couldn't even play anymore because he was such an important force on that team. Those would be the 2 guys who I think have the personality, the skill set, and or the experience to do it. The others, like A-Rod, I would say no.
Jayson Stark with us on 1045 The Team. It's curious to me and why I love baseball that a guy who, aside from PEDs, as far as Yankee fans, is best known for his golden thong and how it would help people break out of slumps with Giambi.
Yeah, well, that was from another time in another place.
All right, so you mentioned A-Rod in there. What I know the podcast you and Buster talked about it a little bit. What is next for Alex Rodriguez?
I really thought he was going to be a Marlin on September 1st. I really felt like they were moving in that direction, and I felt like he wanted to keep playing. Somebody said to me after his press conference with the Yankees that nobody dreams of growing up to be in the 696 homer club. He wants those 4 homers. He does.
Right.
He talked about it that day. And so I think the fact that he's got that in his head is going to make him want to get back in the game next year. He's never used that retire word. So here is my question. If he wants to keep playing, why is he not playing in September? September was the time. Rosters are expanded. There's a lot of bonus roster slots. There's no expectation if you're on a team in September that you have to play a lot. You can play a very limited role. That would be one reason. And the other thing is, I talked to one team that I thought might have some interest. I still am not clear on whether they did or didn't, but this is a really high-ranking official on that team, and he said to me, we would have interest in September if we had interest at all. But next year, that's 6 more months of not playing by a guy who hadn't played real well. And that's a good point, don't you think?
Absolutely. Now, Jayson, is there any merit to we've had the conversation here on the show, that he's going to take this time, really work on being a first baseman and try to do it right? Is there any merit to that, or is it the longer you're out, the worse you are?
I think I would vote on the longer you're out, the worse you are. But I don't know how Alex's mind works. I just know that when he messed around with being a first baseman as a Yankee, he hated it. And they decided real quickly by mutual decree that this was not a good idea. He looked bad over there. Now, the one factor to remember in Miami is that their infield coach, Perry Hill, is as good as it gets. He's taken worse-looking players than A-Rod, worse-looking infielders than A-Rod, and turned them into passable first basemen. So I know that they would use that as a selling point, at least in their own minds. Whether it would work for him, I don't know. But I don't know. Suppose they sign him after the season and then have him work with Perry Hill over the winter? Yeah, maybe, possibly. But I just don't know that he can do that. People think that anybody can learn to play first base. It's not true. You guys remember Mike Piazza?
Yeah. we try to forget that part.
Well, it takes a certain. I know that Alex fielded ground balls at third base, which was a corner infield position, and threw them across the diamond. And now he really wouldn't have to throw. But it takes learning the footwork and learning where to be. It means learning what balls to chase and what balls not to chase. Because if you chase the ground balls at first base that you chased at third base, there's nobody there covering first. You catch him. So there's a lot to learn in that position. It's way harder than people think.
ESPN's Jayson Stark right here on 104.5 The Team, ESPN Radio with Levack and Wolf. So, Jayson, this has been kind of, as a big baseball fan, kind of a dark end of the season for me. We lose Prince Fielder. A-Rod's out. Mark Teixeira is going to hang it up. Big Poppy's going to hang it up. Can you remember a time when we've lost so many big names in one season?
As somebody who spits out a lot of trivia questions, both to Mike and Mike and on our site now with Trivia Tuesday, I have certain go-to players who are always either the answer to the question or the inspiration for the question. To lose four guys like that in 1 year, that's rough on me. This is right up there with the year that Todd Helton and Roy Oswalt retired. I mean, Adrian Beltre is going to stand alone now. It's not good.
Just don't touch his head.
We actually did some research on this at ESPN.com and found we'd never had four players with this many home runs call it a year in the same year.
Wow.
So you're right. There really is without precedent if you just use home runs as the benchmark.
Jayson Stark with us. So, Jayson, one of the big arguments, they call me pinstripe pants because I'm such a Yankee homer. Is this the brightest the young Yankees have looked since the early 90s?
Well, this is the first time since then that I think you can look at their team and look at their organization and actually see the future. I think that's the way that I would put it. When the trading deadline bevy of deals was over, they had 6 of Keith Law's top 50 prospects in baseball. Now, we weren't ranking the top 50 prospects back then, but I'm going to say it's the first time that's happened since the 90s. So that's impressive. And then, you've seen what some of these guys are capable of already. Aaron Judge is a huge dude with big power. I think he's got more holes than we've seen so far, and they're going to be exploited, and he's going to be tested. But tremendous talent. Gary Sanchez, 5 home runs already. Tremendous talent. They've got to figure out the pitching part. There's no doubt about that. They've got a lot of other holes to fill, and they've got guys blocking the path in at least some of those cases. But you can see where it's leading now, and that's really exciting, I think, if you love the Yankees.
It is. Jayson Stark, the other New York team, the big debate about the Mets right now, 4 games out. Neil Walker about to take 3 games off for the birth of his child. You've covered baseball very long time. Should he take that time off?
I try not to be judgmental about stuff like this because human beings play these games. And so would it be okay if it was April, but it's not okay now, for example, because they're not playing well? What's the logic between saying he shouldn't do this, even though people do it all the time?
Well, I don't know. It's interesting to me because as a guy who grew up in a man's world where it's, dude, you got to go to work. You get a day, but you go to work. I'm struggling with this because it is his first child. He should have time off, but the Mets need him so bad. I'm literally torn down the middle on this.
I understand they need him. This is a personal decision. It's a life decision. These guys are allowed to have lives, and I'm just not ready to jump into that world. If you're good enough, you should be good enough to absorb 3 or 4 days without him, I think. And the problem I see with the Mets is they're just not good enough. If I've done the math correctly, what are there, 9 under since May the 9th?
That sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah, and they have to pass 3 teams to get to the wild card. The last I looked, Baseball Prospectus was projecting that it's going to take 85 wins to be the second wild card. So let's try to figure out what the Mets would have to do. They have to go 25 and 17. Does this look like a team that's ready to go 25 and 17? Does the rotation this year versus last year look like that's possible? I don't see it.
There's the logic we needed. Now everything's cleared up. I love it. Jayson Stark, of course, you did bring up the trivia, and I just want to let you know that here in the Capital Region, 104.5 The Team Land, we usually talk about your Mike and Mike trivia all day long. It's like an argument like, well, I got one of the names. How many did you get? So thank you for raising our bar.
Glad to help out with that. I hope you take the Trivia Tuesday on our site every week, too, because it's fun to play. It's a little different. It's multiple choice.
Yes, which is helpful.
You'd think it'd be a lot easier. People keep telling me it's not, but it's fun to play.
I have to make sure that I've got my ego in the right place when I take it.
I'd be happy to ask you one of the questions from this week if you want to take a shot at it.
Yeah, okay. All right, I'm brave enough. Let's go.
All right, you ready?
Yep.
Prince Fielder was the inspiration this week. Played in 44 postseason games. Among active players who have never been a Yankee, a Cardinal, or a member of the Red Sox, who's played in the most postseason games? I'll give you 4 choices. A, Miguel Cabrera. B, Buster Posey. C is Chase Utley. D is Jason Worth.
I'm going to go Buster Posey, B.
Do you know that Buster Posey is actually 4th on that list?
What?
The answer is Miggy. He's got 55. Jason Worth's got 53. I don't have the list up in front of me, but I believe Utley's at 51. Posey just below that, 49 maybe, 47, something like that.
So I took the worst possible choice is what you're telling me.
Of the 4?
Yes.
That's correct.
He's Jayson Stark.
Everybody guesses him. He's really easy. He's a very compelling guess.
Well, every other year, the Giants are going to win the World Series, so you would assume that every other year he would go deep into the playoffs.
We've seen a lot of them, that's for sure.
Jayson Stark is money. Jayson, thank you so much for making time for us. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, enjoyed it, man. Thanks.